All right, so in this one, we're going to do is make it so that when we move left and right, the walk animation plays. When we jump, the jump does. And when we're not moving, idle plays. So that this makes a little more sense. Okay, so to do that, we need to go to the Animator. Now, if it doesn't show up here, just go Window, Animation, Animator. Okay, so I'm just going to move this over a little bit. Let's move this over a little. Okay, so basically what you have is a state machine. Okay, I don't know if you're familiar with these or not, but the idea is that you have a node, and that basically it has a path to go to another node. Once whatever condition is in here is met, it goes from here to this one, and then you can have other arrows going to other ones that those conditions get met. Okay, it's a lot like programming when you think about it, right? It's basically just visual programming. And we use this state machine here. Okay, so right off the bat, you're going to see that there's an entry, and then it goes to here. And that just means that this is the default animation. So when the game starts, it's going to just go into here. There's really nothing more to it than that. This always needs to be, okay? Now, if it's on the wrong one, all you got to do is just right-click and just go set as default state, and then that will become the default state. So if for some reason yours is not on idle, you could put it on one of the other ones. So you probably want to have it on idle by default. That way, if the player's not touching it, that's what happens. Okay. Now, from there, what we need to do basically is say, okay, we can do this two ways. We can go like this. I can go, okay, here, make transition to this. And then this can make a transition back. And this can make a transition here. Don't do this. I'm showing you. And then this can make a transition here, and then this can make a transition here, and this can make a transition back, right? Because I can go from idle to jumping, right? So I can stand still and then jump, right? So I can say, oh, when you leave the ground, jump. And then, if I land back on the ground, go back to idle. And I also can go from idle to walking, and I can also go from walking to jump, right? So they can all go to each other. So this is one way of doing it. It's actually how I used to do it to some extent. I'm just going to delete all these because that's not what I want to do. Instead, what I'm going to do is this. You can go from any state to these other ones, right? So like, let's say I'm fighting or something. I can go from fighting to idle, and I can go, from fighting to walking to jump. So basically, any one of these can actually be done from any state. I don't have to go to so for instance, if I could only get to walk after jumping, I would have to go player idle to walk, or to jump, and then to walk. And then this to this to this. And that way you can't accidentally, skip a step and go from here to here. A better example is this. Let's say I wanted my player to be able to run. Let's say I have a walk and a run animation. Well, I can't go directly to run, right? You got to walk before you can run. So what I would have to do is go to walk, and then from walk to run. And then from run to go back, you have to go through walk to get back to run, right? Because, you run and then you kind of slow down. So that would be a good example of kind of like having to go through multiple stages or states in order to get to where you want. But instead, these can all be met from any one of those. So I'm just going to click and drag. Let's just pull this guy down here. And we'll just put these all right next to each other like so. And we'll put the any state right here. Okay. And we'll put entry right here. And just because it's annoying me, I'm just going to put this one in the middle just to make it look nice and pretty. Okay. And okay. So we can go from any state to any one of these. So to do this, we're going to right click and you go make transition, and you're going to go like that. And then you're going to right click, make transition, and go there, and right click, make transition, and go there. Okay. So that means that you can go from here to there. See how the arrow's pointing? Now normally you would right click and go make transition, you go back, but you can't go back to any state because you can go to anything from here. So what that means is that I can go to this one, but because any state's always possible, I can go from here to here because I would go through the any state. Okay, so this is just a little bit easier than doing it the other way. All right, yay. So we've got that going on. So right off the bat, it's going to go from here to here. But if I want to do this or even this one after these, I need to fix that. Okay, so we have to, in a way, have this arrow, right? We have to say, what is the condition that's going to say, oh, you can do this? And what are the conditions that say we can do this? And what are the conditions that say we do this? Okay. So we have the conditions. Now, currently, if I hit plus, there's no parameters. So basically, that's where this comes into play. So we can have different parameters and give them values. Basically, they're just they're properties or variables. And we can just say if the variable is such and such, then it's allowed to transition from here to here. Okay. So we really only need 2 to start with. So I'm at the little plus up here. And let's do bool. And we'll say on ground. So basically, if they're on ground, we can make that one variable. So for instance, for player walk to happen, right, they have to be on the ground. For player idle to happen, they have to be on the ground. And for player jump to happen, they have to be not on ground, right? So it needs to be false. So it needs to be true for these 2 and false for this one. But you can see that's not enough variables for us to get to our 3 states here, because that only gets us these 2 and this one. So it makes this one work, but these 2 are still need something else. So to go from player idle to player walk is what? Speed. So what we're going to do is click on this, and we will do a float this time, because the speed is a float. And we'll say is walking. Okay, so basically now we can set these up. So to go from any state to, let's say, walking, right? We're going to go over here and hit this little plus. And is ground needs to be true. We need to be on the ground, right? That's the first thing that needs to happen. We'll hit the little plus again. The other variable will have is walking. And we're going to say if the value of is walking is greater than, and we'll say 0.1. So that it's not full speed, but as soon as they start moving, the walking will happen. Okay? Great. Now I'm going to click on this arrow. Hit plus. Plus. Again, on ground is true. It needs to be true. So hit the plus again. And then what we're going to do is walking. And we're going to say if it's less than 0.01. So if our speed is less than, 0.1, it's going to make is walking, is walking is kind of, going to be less than that, right? So, really that should be speed. I wonder if I can change that. Let's do X. X. Speed. Will that change it? Oh, it did. Okay, good. Because is walking makes it sound like a true and false, and that's not what we're doing for. So we'll say X speed instead. Sorry about that. Okay, just right click or double click on it? Double click on it. Okay. Anyway, so so if speed is less than that, then it's moving. And then this one's actually very easy. We're going to click on this and we're going to say on ground if that is false. And that's all we need, because you can be moving too, right? But you're not going to be running in the air. So this only needs 1. These guys, they need the 2. Okay, good. So now we have our transitions. And this will somewhat work, but there is an issue. And normally this is actually really great. I'm going to start with player walk here. But in this case, we don't want that. So if you remember, our animations are stiff. They're just literally sprites that are replaced by other sprites. So there's no transition. If you look at here, I'm gonna expand this little setting here for settings. And you see how it says fixed duration? What that means is that it has to play for at least a quarter of a second. So if I go, like just tap it real quick, it won't, even if I only tap it for a second, it will play longer than when I'm holding it. I actually don't want that. I don't want it to have to play for 0.25 seconds. I'm going to turn that off. Okay. So basically that's going to be off because I want to immediately go from one to the other. I don't want it to have to play the full animation, because it could be something where like you're walking and then you stop and your player will keep walking even after you stopped, and then it will stop. Like it'll take a quarter of a second to stop. And so it makes it feel sluggish. So we're going to turn that off. And then the next thing I want to do is, where is it? Has exit time. We don't want that. Where's the other? Oh, transition duration. So this one, I'm going to make 0. Okay. And the reason why we want this, it's kind of the same as the other one. So fixed duration. What was that set to then? Oh, I guess it was 0.75. Sorry. I was looking at this. So, we want this to be 0. And the reason why I want it to be 0 is the same thing I said before. So normally, if we were doing, like, let's say a 3D game, right, it could blend, because it's joints that are being animated, it could blend from one animation to the other. So I'm sure if you played a video game and you can clearly tell that there's a walk animation and a run animation, but if you go halfway between them, you can see it's like a halfway point. Like it's partly walk and it's partly run. Like the character will slowly move a little bit faster. That's because of this transition duration. But I don't have any transition. So it can't blend between this motion and another motion because it's on the sprite. So it's just a graphic. There's nothing to mix. So I'm going to take that transition duration and make it 0. So now when it goes from one to the other, it's going to be immediate. By taking fixed duration and transition duration off, it'll make it an immediate motion. Now, like I said, if you're doing a 3D game, these are kind of not the fixed one necessarily, but the transition duration definitely is. Fixed duration can be useful for some other stuff that we'll talk about later, but the transition one in particular is useful for that. Okay, so I'm going to go to this, and I'm basically going to do the same thing. I'm going to click this off, and we're going to turn this to 0, okay? And then we're going to go to jump and do the same thing again. I'm going to turn this off, do this to 0, and I got to do one other thing. Particularly on this one, I want to turn this transition to self off. Basically, if you don't turn this off, it'll get like stuck on jump. I don't want it to keep transitioning back to itself. I want it to be able, I don't want it to be able to do that. Okay. So that should work. I think we can leave the transition to self on the other ones. I don't think that'll be an issue, but with this one, I need to turn that off. All right. So that's all the setup. What does it say? Player transition in state, any state uses parameter, which does not exist in controller. I don't know what they're. Try it. Hang on a second. I just want to see. Is it? Oh, you know what that's from? That's because I had one in here that was empty because I changed the name of it. Never mind. That's why. Watch. If I go to console and hit clear, it'll go away. Okay. So the next thing to do is actually make the. I need to hook up our player controller to this. Okay. So let's go to scripts, and we're gonna go player controller. Just open that up. Just gonna go over here. And we're going to add some code in order for us to control it. So the thing we need to control here, this is on the animator component, okay? So we're in the animator window, but if you actually click on the player, you can see when we added the animation, come on player, it added an animator component, and that's how we control these parameters and anything in here. That is from this animator, right? The animator controls the animations. Ooh, makes sense. Okay. So that's what we need to get a hold of right off the bat. No, thank you. No, thank you. Okay. So just like I have this private rigid body, I'm going to make another one right here, private animator, because that's what it is. And we're going to call it, player anim. Okay. So that'll be our player animator. That's what it's going to hold. And just like this, I'm actually just going to copy it. Control C, Control V. We're going to do player anim. And we're going to get component, and not rigid body 2D, but animator, okay? So basically, we're going to go ahead and store the animator in there, and that way we have access to it. Okay, now what I'm going to do is add a new function here that's going to control my animation. So it's just going to be void, and we'll just call it player animations, okay? And even better if you know how to spell animations. And it doesn't need any value, or we're not sending in any stuff in its parameters. And there we go. Okay. So now if you remember, we stored the animator as player anim. So that's how I'm going to access the parameters that we made. Because basically the idea here is that I'm going to change these numbers through code. I'm going to change these, and by changing these, it'll allow these different states to happen. So basically I'm just trying to change the numbers here by the variables I already have. Okay. So you're going to do player anim, right, which is the animator, and then we're just going to say dot set bool. That's just the name of the function that allows me to set the bool. And the bool I want to set, I'm going to go ahead and put the semicolon after it, is quotes on ground. That's the one argument we need to send it, and then the other argument is the value I want to give it. Okay, in this case, it's going to be ground, right? So just so you get the idea, set bool will set a bool on the player anim. So in this case, I only have one, but allow me to set the bool of something on my parameters. In that case, it's this one. And then I tell it I want to set the bool on the on ground parameter. That's what this is. Okay, that was just I just showed you. And I'm going to give it the value of ground. And if you remember, we have ground right here. So I'm literally just going to send it a true and false because I'm already detecting ground anyway for me to be able to jump. So I'm just going to send it the same information that I have. So basically, if ground is false, it's going to put false on that on ground parameter. If ground is true, it's going to put true on there. And that's going to allow me to play the jump animation or not. And that's it. It's really easy. Now this one's going to be slightly more complicated. So if that's set bool, what do you think this is? Set, float. And then again, I need to tell it, let's go ahead and put the semicolon. I need to tell it what I want to do, and this is going to be on the X speed, okay? And then I have to give it the number. So you would think, and it is, it's this, input dot get axis, because just like we get like the get axis right here, I'm going to get axis. So basically I'm going to get the numbers I'm pushing on my keyboard, okay? And it's going to be horizontal. Okay. And you're going to think, yay, that's going to work. It's not. And here's the reason why it's not going to work. This, if you remember, this results, right? This will give me the input of my horizontal, which is going to be my left and right arrow. Do you remember what the values are? It goes from 1 if I push right, to 0 to have nothing pushed, to -1. Look up here. X speed, right? If you look at these, it needs to be, we have it set to if it's greater than 0.1, which means it's only going to accept positive numbers. So if I give it a negative number, it's not going to do the walk. So meaning if I walk left, this isn't going to animate. It's only going to animate if I walk to the right because that will be above 0.1. So what we have to do is a little bit of code trickery, if you will. And I'm going to wrap this in another method that's going to allow me to find a specific value. So we go, let's just put that over so you can see. It's going to be math F. And basically math F is just, it's a class that you can call at any time. And inside of it has a bunch of different like math things that it can do. Like it can find like sign of things or, I don't know, you can look it up. But basically there's a bunch of different math functions that it can run, and you can use them for your various things. So in this case, we're going to do math F, and it's going to be dot ABS, analog breaks. It's not what it is. And we'll put a parentheses here, and I got to put another one on the end here. So basically, math F.ABS finds the absolute value. So what that means is, if this is, let's say this is 0.3, it's going to give me 0.3. But if it's minus 0.3, it's still going to give me 0.3. It basically removes the negative and makes whatever the number that gives me a positive number. So if it's 0, it's still going to be 0. But if it's 1, it'll give me 1. If it's minus 1, it'll just give me 1. If it's minus 5 or 0.5, it will still give me 0.5. So this is basically just going to make sure that no matter what, I always get a positive number out of my input here. Okay, so go ahead and save that and go back to Unity. And hopefully this all will work correctly. And let's see. There's usually some error. I always mess something up. Okay. Oop. Okay. So that's not good. All right, so I think it's that transition thing. So let's select this guy, open this up, and let's turn off can transition to self on these other ones. All right. Oop. Okay, so I'm going to click on the animator, and you can see on ground is not being detected. So that's the issue. Okay, so let's look at actually let's play the game. My assumption actually is maybe that I told you it wasn't going to work. All right, my assumption is that if I go to scene, I can probably, let's click on player, and let's see, Oh, that looks like ground check it's penetrating. Okay. Player. And let me see, ground is being detected, but yet it's not being sent to the, I'm not getting any errors. Curious. Let's go back to the code here. Send it ground. On ground. Set bool on ground. Oh, I know why it's not working. I'm an idiot. Okay, so let's stop this real quick. So the reason why it's not working is I made this thing here. Okay, there's nothing calling this. This is just it's a function I made, but it's never being called. It never gets run, right? So like update always gets run because it gets run on every frame, and start always gets run because it starts on that. There's nothing to tell this to run because this is a homebrew. So what I'm going to do is at the end of my update here, so basically on every frame, I'm going to tell it player animations. I'm going to tell it to run this. Okay, now save it. So now it's going to run this function inside of my update every time. Okay, that was what it was. And then we'll play it. And you can see, works pretty good. And we can grab my heart, and I can jump over here, and everything functions as it should. That's it. So now our game officially has animations, and you would basically just apply the same principle to any animations you want to be driven by whatever. Okay, and that's yeah, that's it. So play around with that. Hopefully everything works, and you are good to go.